Hello, Dan Humberg here, harvestfires.com. These are support videos for people installing Firestop systems on their combine harvesters. The one you're watching is intended to help anybody who's installing a system on an 8120 case combine. This particular video is how to fold up and assemble the tin pieces that go around the exhaust manifold and the turbocharger. I won't be installing it on a combine today. We may do a separate video to show how to put it on the combine itself, but I will show you how to bend the tin pieces, how to identify which way the bends go and things like that, and then show you what they look like in an assembled configuration so that you can mark them if you want to, or make it easier when it comes to time to put it on the combine. Before I begin, I always have the same cautionary statement that this system is designed to protect combine harvesters from endemic fires or frequent fires that occur in volatile crops, particularly sunflowers is what we're developed for. It protects the exhaust manifold, the turbocharger, and the first part of the exhaust pipe, which is where the vast majority of those fires find their ignition point. But it will not stop every fire on your combine, because fires can occur because of other sources, other ignition sources, like a failed bearing or a electrical short or a failed alternator or some other source of ignition on the combine. However, this is the chronic problem that occurs at the exhaust manifold this is intended to fix. And so be aware of that as you approach the combine itself, being vigilant about the possibility of fires from other sources as well. Okay, we've got to look down here at the bench. I'm going to do the bends on the pieces of flat tin as they're shipped. These pieces are laser cut in 24 gauge galvanized. All of the places where bends need to occur, well, that's always the intention anyway, all of the intended bends should have perforated like dotted lines that will enable the piece to bend on, preferentially bend on that line. Most of them you can do by hand. Actually, all of them you could probably do by hand. It's just that some are long enough that it's a pain. I have several tools that I use. One is this little sheet metal vice grip outfit that I bought at Runnings. It's good for the shorter bends. I have a little bit longer version of the same kind of thing. This one I bought at Harbor Freight. It's really useful if you have to do more than one of these. It does about 6 inches. And then I have a piece of angle iron that I have another piece of strap, 1.5 inch strap that's bolted on the ends to that, but I can keep it kind of loose, and I put this in the vise next to me to do a couple of the long bends. You could make one of these real easily if you wanted to use one. You don't have to, but it makes a clean bend on a long piece where it's hard to do that with these smaller tools or by hand. So we're going to start the process. I don't really find that I need gloves here. The laser cut stuff is rough on the edges, but it's not particularly sharp, so I don't find that I'm getting cut up a lot. But once in a while, if you trim a piece with a tin snips or whatever, it can be sharp. So just be aware of that so you don't cut yourself. Okay, the very first piece that we're going to do is marked number 1. It's actually marked number 1 on the inside of the piece. I really intended to put there's a laser cut number 1 with an underscore underneath it. Intended that to be on the outside, but it didn't always get that way in the CAD model. Maybe I'll fix that next year, but not this year. This is the top outside of the piece then. These keyholes you can bend up slightly. They're a place where we let air out, but they need to be bent up a little bit. Eventually we can pull them open more if we need to. The very first bend we're going to make is a long flange along the back edge of this. Then we'll bend this up 90 degrees to the patent marking here, and that face will go against the block of the engine, and we'll be able to put a bolt in through this slot and a bolt in through this slot into an open tapped hole in the head to hold this piece in place. I'm going to do this one with the long angle iron in my vise. I'll move you over here so you can see that once. So that's the first bend. It's a vertical 90-degree bend. The rest of the flanges on the outer edges of this will bend down rather than up like that one did. So they're going to bend away from the top surface. I'll do the long ones first. I'm going to use this tool there. And that's the first piece. That will actually be the top that goes over the top of the exhaust manifold on the 8120. Okay, this is the hole where we'll eventually bring air into the system, clean air into the system, and we'll attach this to everything else. So part number one. Part number two has a larger number two with an underscore here. This goes under the left side of the manifold. It will match up, it will match up underneath this one. And then, so in this case, the flanges around the outside edge are bent up because we're gonna screw a piece of sheet metal around there. So I'm gonna do this one first. Now there's two other small flanges here that have dotted lines on. They're about 3/8 of an inch deep. I use this tool, and those bend down because this piece is going to fit up against the lower block of the engine right underneath the exhaust manifold. There is a raised casting boss in the block there that runs the length underneath the manifold. These tabs are going to go into a slot above that, and then these will bump into that long casting boss and position this thing for us so that it can't go up and down at that point. There's a keyhole here. This one should be pushed down or out away from the number here a little bit to open it up. That's again a place where we're going to allow air to exit the system. Part number two. Part number three, similar part, goes under the right hand side. It's very similar in orientation to like the other one. It goes underneath the right side of the manifold, and just like the last one, these tabs around this edge are going to be bent up. I'm going to take these two tabs, again bend them down the opposite way of the side tab, or these other tabs. This one's a little short to get this hold of with this. And we've got those stop tabs bent. Now there's a tab on this left end. That one does not get bent 90 degrees. That's really overlaps the other piece, the bottom of the other piece, and there's a couple pilot holes here for screws to bolt it together. In this case, I'm going to bend this up a little bit, maybe 20 to 25 degrees. Then I'm going to back off with the clamp a little bit, clamp onto it tight, and I'm going to try and bend it back a little bit. The goal here is to get a little bit of an offset, and I can feel that I just have a very little offset, so it staggers up. It'll overlap the other piece and keep us going in a straight line so the thicknesses of the metal don't screw anything up. Probably not necessary, but that's the idea. So it's just an offset bend. One more keyhole tab in here, push this one down a little ways. Later on we'll pull that open when we mount it on the machine. Part number three. Part number four, there's a four with an underscore on this tab here. This is going to fit between the exhaust turbine and the compressor turbine. It'll fit actually right up against the face of the compressor turbine, and this semicircular cut fits right over the connection between the two. That's where the turbocharger bearing is. And so this is going to be there on that side. There'll be a matching one here on the other side of the exhaust turbine, and these flanges around the edge need to be bent down towards the table if you're looking at this. It's actually towards the side that has the number 4 cut into it. If you're looking at the 4 like it should be with an underscore, they bend that way. Another little tab here that will bend the other way. That will attach this to the piece to the side that covers the manifold, again 90 degrees. So piece number 4, three flanges bent away from this face towards the face with the 4 on the flange, one bent the opposite way. Piece number 5 goes underneath, will actually attach to the previous piece. The holes line up. It's going to be one that overlaps that way and one that overlaps this way, so they'll kind of interleave a little bit. That's the piece that goes between the turbocharger and the compressor turbine. And again, like the last one, these flanges are going to bend down away from this face. This face, the number 5 is going to be on the inside part of that rather than the outside part. So we're going to bend these flanges. Be careful. This one with a little doodad or dip in it up here, that's going to bend the opposite way. That one's going to attach onto a face out here on the side. But the rest of them we're going to bend down away from this, 90 here. I'm going to show you a little trick. Cut here. This is the place where we're getting the oil return line from the turbocharger is going to fit through that hole. I'm going to cut into one of the dash marks in here, just to the side of that, and I'm going to leave that one pointed down like this for now. It'll be more obvious when you do the installation, but it takes more room than that cut. The turbocharger, the oil line will fill most of this space, and we can bend this near it when we get to that point. Okay, this flange bends down like the others, 90, and this one with the little corner cut out of it will bend up, opposite of the other flanges. Okay, there's part number 5, bottom left, my left, your right, side of the turbocharger exhaust turbine here, compressor right up against it here. Okay, this piece has got a couple of the little cutouts that didn't fall out from the laser. You can pop those out. Piece number 6, it has a 6 with an underscore here. Again, that is on the, take it back. This time the 6 is on the outside of the part, not on the inside of where it ends up being. This is going to go on the other side of the exhaust turbine. These holes are to allow air to pass out to go along the exhaust pipe here. That's what those cutouts are for. I have 1, 2, 3 tabs. Notice which one, 3 I'm talking about. The one with the 6, the one next one over, the next one over are going to be bent down towards the bench top away from me. This one on this front face, that's going to go up against one of the previous parts or the parts to come yet. But that's going to be bent the opposite way. So these 3 bend one direction. This one is going to bend the opposite direction. Okay, that part's ready to go. Piece number 7. Again, I got the tabs to pull out of here so that air can flow. Piece number 7, there's a 7 cut into one of the flanges with an underscore. That piece, that one, the 7 is on the inside of the piece. Let's see, yeah, inside of the piece. So these 3 tabs, we can check it to make sure. It should overlap this piece like that and make a circle here. And the pilot holes for the screws should line up with pilot holes on the other piece. And in fact, that is the case. So this tab is going to bend up. The other 3 are going to bend down towards the table when it's oriented like this. If you get them wrong, you can reverse the bends, but you can't reverse them too many times or the metal will fatigue and break. So this lines up like this, and we've got a place to bolt this or screw it on to that face. Okay, we have part 009. The part number should be cut through here, but it's missing in this one because the laser neglected to cut numbers on this particular set. I'm going to take a little notch off of this flange right here because it'll fit in correctly into a little groove on the block if we get rid of that corner. We took that corner. Now look at this piece and the shape. I've got a keyhole here that didn't get cut through. I'll fix that by hand or with a small grinding tool to cut that out. But we're looking at piece number 9. You want to look at it this way with this knockout or this L-shaped cutout or this corner cutout down in this corner. This is actually going to be the outer face of this. Fits over the turbo or the exhaust manifold on the radiator end side. So There would be a top and a bottom, and this is kind of the outside. The bends we make on it, this first one, this little 1/4 inch flange here, we're going to grip with tightly with this tool. I'll bend it out about 45 degrees, not 90 degrees, about 45 degrees. I'm going to grab this one, bend that about 45 degrees, and then the next one, you can do by hand generally. Well, that didn't work all that well. Laser didn't cut these very well, so they're not as nice a bends. When we get done with these bends, though, we should have about 45 here and about 45 here, so this one's pretty much perpendicular to this. Again, we can fix that when we put it together if there's any variation in that. This keyhole that it's marked by the laser here, but it didn't cut through, we would push up a little bit, up towards you, just to open it up a little bit. And then make sure this is in this corner relative to this and not on the top side the way I did it on a previous assembly. Piece number 10 goes on the other side, and I'll show you where these go in just a minute. Only has 2 bends to make. Very similar to the last one. This one bends down 45. 45 on this one. 45 and 45 gives me 90, and I've got a 90-degree total bend around that corner. Push the keyhole tab up slightly, and that piece is ready to go. I'm going to show you where these go so far, just how they go together. Well, I can do that by grabbing this one. This is a fully assembled set of tin for this same model. We started with this piece on top, here, this long piece, and then we did the 2 short pieces that went underneath that are the same shape, kind of. This one here was number 2. The longer one is number 3. They overlap here, and there's a screw that holds them together. And you got these tabs that'll butt into that, up to that casting boss. The rest of these will fit into a slot and align this thing under the manifold. So those 2. Then we did this one that will bolt to the previous 2 and hold it all together above the boxes in the left side of the exhaust manifold. The last one we just did, it's a little harder to see here, but goes right here, and it attaches to the top and bottom parts and boxes in the right side of the manifold. So that's where we're at so far. Next piece is this long strip that's going to go around, and it's going to box in the turbocharger. Oh, I didn't point out, I'm sorry. Those left and right sides around the exhaust turbine. This one goes on between the turbine and the compressor. There's a screw that holds it onto this face. The 2 pieces screw together. Notice that the screw in this case comes from the compressor or the exhaust turbine side. It's very hard to reach this because the compressor turbine is right here. You can only get those screws through from the other side. So it's a little tricky, but you can get those in there. Screw that together and put it on there. The opposite one on the other side where the exhaust comes out, it's kind of covered up right now, but it's these 2 pieces similar fit on there and go onto screw onto this face of this piece number 10 or whatever that one was, right here. And that brings us to the next one. And that's this long strip that's going to wrap around the turbo. The top, this is the uppermost end of it, near the top of the turbo, and then we're going to wrap around, and notice these 2 cuts here. These are for this is the return oil line from the turbo bearing. This is the supply oil line. We have to get that in and out of there, and so these are the places where that's going to go through. We'll probably enlarge these holes when we do the installation, or even you do it before you do the installation, And we'll probably cut slits here and bend these so that the metal is parallel to that pipe so that it can't have a sharp edge or a rough edge or braiding on that pipe. You don't want to damage those oil lines or you'll lose your oil and then you'll lose the engine. But notice that those go on this side, on my left side to be your right side, and then I'm going to bend this tin in a series of steps to go around that. I didn't want to bend in the right spot that time. So we've got a kind of a around the horn thing done here. This last tab, this very last one, it's about 1.5 inches wide. That will bend outward instead of the direction we've been going with everything else, and it comes out almost 90 degrees. That probably will be 90 degrees when I get done with it. So we look like that. Now this is actually gonna wrap around the turbocharger and up underneath the box that we've created with those other pieces. And if you do this right and you get reasonably crisp bends here, all of these pilot holes will line up with screw holes on those matching parts. For example, here's the that's the lower part. I want the upper part. Here's the upper part of the right side of the turbo housing. This piece will come in here and a butt up there, and the holes will line up just like that. And you can put the screws in there and put it together. So piece number 8. Piece number 11. Got the little 11 with the underscore on there. There's a simple bend in the middle. It goes 90 degrees. This is a bracket that will screw to the bottom left side of the manifold cover, and it has a slot in it, and if we screw that on in the right place, then this oblong slot or hole will be over the top of a raised casting boss that has a open threaded hole in it, unused. And so we can put an 8mm bolt through there and pull this tight up against there, and if it's screwed to the bottom of that, we just lock the bottom part of the housing onto the block. So part 11, easy bend. Part number 12. 12 is quite similar. It's also going to make a little bracket like that, but it's a little more complicated. And this will go on to the bottom right-hand side of the manifold cover. The right-hand side is the side near the transmission and away from the radiator. And there are holes in that one already. I'll show you that. There are 4 holes here, right near the underscored 3. Those holes will line up with this, and we can screw that together. You actually don't want to screw that on there until after you've got this piece on the machine, because it's really hard to get it in place if this big thing is poking down there. There is a raised casting boss farther down on the block this time. It's got an open hole in it, and this slot will lay over that hole, and we can put a bolt through there to hold this side of the assembly on. So piece number 12. Okay, now we get to a little more puzzle-like stuff. I've got piece number 13, 14, 15, and 16. Okay. These are going to box in the exhaust pipe as it leaves the turbo, and it may, on the 8010 model 11 year, which is what you're looking at, 8120 model 11 year, the exhaust pipe leaves the turbo and comes out a little ways, and then it makes a jog. It angles, and then it realigns and comes up to the muffler. And we've got to figure out how to box that in. And to do it with a pipe section or a stove pipe or something is really awkward. So I designed this as an alternative to that. And I got to look at these to figure out which one's which. there's a dotted line here. These tabs on this end are going to go up against the turbo housing, the flat face of that piece that we've already would already have assembled. There's a dotted line for a bend down the road here. It's farther on this one than it is on this one. So piece number 14 is the bottom of the box that's going to box in that exhaust pipe. And in this case, all of the flanges on the edge are going to be bent upward from this face. I'm looking at the 14 with the underscore underneath it here, correctly oriented. And so I'm looking at that face, and I'm going to bend these flanges up. Now the exception to that is the one on this end. That one needs to be bent out downward so that it can be screwed against the face of the turbo housing. Okay, and then there's this crossways one, and that's going to get just a very shallow bend upward. The easiest way for me to do that is to put my index fingers behind it and my thumbs over the top and push my fingers essentially right on the joint, hold it, and just roll it over a little bit. So it gets a little bend. We'll see how much it needs later on. So that's part number 14, and I'll show you how these go together in a little bit. So 14, 15 is going to be very similar part. These should align with each other for the most part, but the bend comes at a different point because when you extend the bottom piece underneath the place where the pipe bends up, we go a little farther out before we start that bend in order to keep the offset, the distance away from the pipe, the same. So these flanges, looking at base of part 15, this is the inside of that box, are going to be rolled up. All of these flanges except the one with the angle on the end, that one's going to be bent down. I'll do that first. Okay, now that was the, I hope I did that right. Okay, we live and learn. I just did that wrong. All of those flanges bend the opposite way that I just did them. Because we're looking at the outside of the part, these line up this way. I think I did them wrong. I'm going to bend them back and turn them 180 degrees around. And we have two cross bends in this one. They may be kind of slight. Make a little one there and make a little one here, and then we'll worry about how much that is later on. So, just about done with that. Okay, now I hope I've got it right. We'll come back to those two. These two are the sides. This is the top, what I'd call the top and the bottom of those. These two are the sides, and they each have a couple of bends to make and a flange on the end. I need to figure out where they go for sure. Okay, I had one of these pieces wrong. Let's review what the best way to, or the correct way to bend these pieces. This is let's start with number 14. I'm looking at the 14. The 14 has got an underscore underneath it, and I'm looking at it as if I would read 14. It's not backwards, it's not upside down. That's cut into the piece by the laser. I'm looking at what I call the top of that manifold cover. And the flanges then around the edge are bent downward, away from me. That may not have been the way I'll try and edit this, because I think the first time I bent those down instead of the direction, or bent them the wrong direction, and I reversed that. This flange on the end bends the opposite direction because that goes against the face of the turbo housing, and it was how we attached this. Then this bend here, there's a single crossways dotted line that it gets a shallow bend, what I'd call upward, away from the direction these flanges are bent. So that's going to be the top. The bottom of the box is similar. It is piece number 15, and now I'm looking at the 15, in this case the laser cut 15 here, and the flanges around the edge are going to be bent up as I'm looking down at that 15. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 flanges bent upward when I'm looking at the underscore 15 right here. This flange on the end is bent downward. That's going to go out and be the way that we can, again, connect on to the face of the turbo cover. Once we have that, those two pieces are going to align above and below each other, the single bend one on top, the other one below. And then these two other pieces will be bent to match. Then this flange needs to be bent that direction or outward. I'm looking at the 13 here on this face, 13 with an underscore, and I'm going to bend this flange up. Okay, and those are the parts that will wrap around the exhaust pipe as it leaves the turbo and goes up towards the muffler. So those four pieces make kind of a box, and we'll screw them together. When we get all the pieces folded, you can screw the whole works together. In fact, I'm going to take a minute to say it before I forget it. I strongly advise you to assemble all of this tin on the bench. It'll give you an idea of the geometry. It will probably tell you if you got any flanges bent the wrong direction, because it will not fit if they're bent the wrong direction. The screw holes won't line up. This will tell you when you do it on the bench, it's a whole lot easier than doing it when you're in the hole behind the engine on the machine. So screw it all together. The other thing you should do is to put a screw in every hole that you can, where there should be a screw. You should put it all together with all of the screws. Now, you don't necessarily have to leave them all in there or put them all in at once. You can just run a screw in and out of many of them, but you want to pre-thread this smaller pilot hole so that when you get on the machine and you're putting a screw in there, many times you're not going to be able to do it with a screwdriver or a long screw gun or whatever. You're going to need to use the little stubby driver that I'll give you with the kit. And maybe you're looking up, maybe it's from the bottom and you can't see the part, or from the back and you have to screw it in. If that hole has already had a screw in at one time, it's a whole lot easier to get that thing to start and thread in and go. Take my word for it. You want to pre-assemble it and put a screw into every hole that's going to require one while it's still on the bench. The other thing you can do while it's assembled on the bench is to take a Sharpie and make some lines across junctions to show where that sorry, my wife's mowing the lawn right outside the window. You can take a Sharpie and go across joints to make reference marks so that when you're assembling it on the combine, you can match up those reference marks and know that you've got the right part in the right orientation. So strongly recommend you do that. There are two parts left to fold. I'm going to check to make sure I don't get this one wrong. This one is number 17. It's got a 17 with an underscore cut there. And that'll be the outside of a U-shaped channel that we're going to make with this piece. So the 17 is readable or barely readable there. It's on the outside of the piece, and there are a series of pilot holes across the bottom edge here. And this piece isn't difficult to bend, it's straightforward. We're going to make 90s. That's that piece. It's bent. What it does is it slips down over the piece that we just assembled before and extends it. And these screw holes along here, or pilot holes along here, will align with pilot holes on the lower piece. This last chunk, number 18, actually doesn't have to be bent at all. It slips. When you get this one in place, this one will slide down inside of it underneath the exhaust pipe, and you can put some screws through the bottom. You want to check the direction, orientation. Of course, I think I did it backwards. Maybe. I don't even know if there is a right or wrong. They align that way, they align this way, that'll work. Anyway, and you can mark across that with a Sharpie if you want to make sure you get them lined up correctly. Let's look at the overall assembly and see where that stuff goes. You're looking down on the assembly, and here's that zigzag box that we just built that goes around the exhaust pipe that makes a bend and then bends upward to come to the muffler. And these last two pieces that we just looked at wrap around from the top down, that U-shaped piece, and it's got those wrap under flanges, and that last little piece slips in there and screws on. She's coming back. She's very thorough. All right. One more time. There she goes. That is the process of folding the tin for a model 11 year or higher case 8120 combine. If you're in the prior to model 11 year and model 10 or earlier, then the tin is the same tin that we use for an 8010. It's the same engine, same exhaust configuration, and that's a different video. So that's how you fold the tin. We'll have a different video that we'll use to show you how to install this on the combine itself. So have a safe harvest. Call me, or you can call or email me if you have questions about this. The website, harvestfires.com, has a place to send an email from, so if you need to contact me, try that.